first thing you need to learn is how we work on the clay table and have our area set up ready to wedge the clay. So when you get to your tables, you're going to see that you've got a bucket of tools that you're going to be sharing. You really only need the wooden guide sticks, a set of those, and a rolling pin to do this first step. Okay, when we work, we always work standing up, so push your chair underneath the table, and then at your table, you're going to see that you have a Tupperware with clay inside. So the lid will be on and latched to keep it airtight so the clay doesn't dry out. So you just need to unlatch the bucket, take the lid off, and then you're going to take out a piece of clay to begin working with. So standing up, I'm going to kind of squish that clay into a ball, and then I'm going to start to wedge the clay. So the proper hand position to wedge, I like to teach, is butterfly hands. So you're going to take your hands, make a butterfly, you're going to wrap those around the clay, and then you're going to push that clay down into the table. You're going to roll the clay back towards you, then you're going to move your hands forward. Push the clay down, roll the clay back, move your hands forward. Push the clay down, roll the clay back, move your hands forward. So if you notice, you don't hear any noise. I shouldn't hear noise when you are wedging the clay. Right now what's happening is the clay is having air bubbles popped. If there's any air bubbles stuck inside, it's making your clay more consistent. And if your clay is really, really wet and sticky, then this is going to help dry out your clay. So I don't have a certain number of times to tell you to do this. It has to do with how your clay is feeling. Because if you wedge too much, you're going to dry out the clay. And if you notice, this tabletop is starting to absorb the moisture from the clay, and you can see it's turning darker. That's how I know that this is starting to dry out. And this could also become a problem because I don't want to work on a spot on the table that's really wet because it's going to stick to that area. So once I've wedged it 5, 6, 7 times, then I'm ready to move on to make my slabs to build the container. So first thing that I need to do is flatten this piece of clay. So now I was on butterfly hands, now I'm going to switch to CPR hands. So one hand on top of the other, and I'm just going to lean over the clay and start to flatten it. Now, I know that I have to fit this size stencil for my box. So when I flatten my clay, I kind of want to shape that clay to be similar to the angle of my stencil. So I'm going to kind of squish that clay to start to shape a rectangle. But when I flatten my clay, I don't want to flatten it shorter than my finger, the palm of my hand, or like the height of the thickness of a finger, because then my clay is going to get too thin. So now I'm ready to roll this out. So I need a set of guide sticks. I have one set on both sides. This controls how thick I can roll the clay, so it doesn't let my clay get too thin. And then I'm going to use this PVC pipe to roll out the clay. So when I do this, I'm going to put my PVC pipe in the middle of the clay, and I'm going to be rolling all the way off the clay, and then I'm going to put the rolling pin in the middle, and I'm going to roll all the way towards me. And now I'm going to check my stencil. So right now my clay is long enough, but it is not wide enough. So I do not want to keep rolling straight up and down because it's just going to get longer and longer, but it's not going to get wide enough. So now what I need to do is turn my clay a quarter turn so that now when I roll, it's going to start to stretch wider. So I start in the middle, and I can roll at a diagonal, but what you want to pay attention to is that your rolling pin is always touching the guide sticks. I never want to turn my rolling pin so that the guide sticks and the rolling pins are all parallel, because now when I roll, my clay is going to get too thin because there's nothing that's going to stop the rolling pin from making it too thin. So now I'm going to stretch out this bottom corner, and I'm going to check my stencil. So I need to stretch it just a little bit more in the corners. Check my stencil. Okay, that is going to fit. So now I can finish rolling until I reach uniform thickness. So I'm going to roll until my clay does not stretch anymore. Once I think I'm finished, I'm going to roll as hard as I can. If nothing stretches, then I truly am done. And then what I want to do is I want to pull this off the table, and I want to look for air bubbles. You'll see just slight little bumps in the surface of the clay if you have an air bubble. Usually your finger can just pop that. So I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there were 2 tiny little air bubbles there that just opened up. Okay, now I'm ready to work with my stencils. So now I'm going to set this stencil on top, and I'm going to cut that out. So I'm going to be using a fettling knife to do the cutting, and I'm going to stand that knife up tall, slide it along my stencil, and this is going to become the bottom piece to your box. So once you have your slab cut out, now what you need to do is take your photocopy of your rough draft drawing, and you're going to use a Crayola marker to put marker on top of the outside edge of your letters. So even draw over the printed black line if your letter used that outside edge. Okay, now I'm going to take that slab of clay that I just cut out, and I'm going to place that right on top of that box that you drew your letter in. It should fit. And I'm going to give that a press, and then I can kind of put one hand under the paper and sandwich it between my hands and flip it over. And now I can give it a paper massage to really make sure that marker is printing on the clay, and it did leave a print. So now I'm going to use a tool like a fettling knife to do all my cutting. So I'm going to stand this tool up tall, and I want to press down till I hit the tabletop, and then I'm just going to slide that knife through the clay, and I'm going to cut away those pieces. So remember, we never throw clay away. The extra clay that you don't use we'll keep at our tables, and we can use that extra clay for our thematic pieces that are going on the top. So I can pull this piece away, and I can pull this piece away, and this has now become the bottom of the box that I'm going to be building.